I'm 24 standing in the entryway of the house I grew up in, and my mom's voice slices through the air like a blade. You're nothing but a drain, Mason. Get out. Now. Her words hit harder than I expected. Not because I didn't see it coming, but because she meant every syllable. Her face is flushed, eyes wide, like I've shattered something she can't glue back together. Behind her, my stepdad, Greg, leans against the kitchen island, arms crossed. He doesn't say a word. He hasn't in months, unless he's asking me to mow the lawn or fix the damn dryer again. My younger sister, Brooke, lounges on the couch, thumbing through her phone like none of this matters. She's the favorite, always has been, pretty charming, never paid a bill in her life. She shoots me a look. It's not even smug, just bored. I stand frozen, keys in one hand, the other clenched tight at my side. Today was supposed to be normal. I worked my shift at the tire shop, picked up groceries they asked for, on my card of course, and came home to find they'd gone out for dinner without telling me. Again, apparently I missed Brooke's pre-birthday brunch. I didn't even know that was a thing. Now I'm being kicked out because I had the audacity to say I felt invisible. I don't argue, I just nod. All right, I say, if that's how it is. I head to my room, the one I haven't touched since high school, where posters are still tacked crookedly on the walls, and my old hoodie from senior year hangs on the bedpost. I grab my duffel, toss in some shirts, a few pairs of socks, and a photo I almost leave behind. One of me and my real dad before he passed. We're on a roller coaster, arms up, mouths wide open. It's the last thing I pack. The air feels heavier as I walk back down the hall. I glance once more at the kitchen, Greg scrolling through his phone, Mom rubbing her temple like she's the victim. Brooks already posted something on Instagram about toxic people needing to be cut off. I don't say goodbye. I don't need to. The front door creaks behind me as it closes. I hear the lock click almost instantly. My car is parked in the driveway, a '98 Civic that wheezes when it turns but runs because I rebuilt the engine with my own hands. Inside, the dashboard light glows like it's trying to console me. I've got $130 stow my name and nowhere to go. But I still turn the key. The first night is the hardest. I crash on Ezra's couch. He's a mechanic at the shop, older than me. Divorced twice, smells like cheap beer and gasoline. His apartment reeks of burnt coffee and cat litter, but he doesn't ask questions. Just hands me a blanket and says, "You're not the first kid. Won't be the last." I lie awake staring at his popcorn ceiling. His cat, Tuna, purrs near my feet. I think about Mom's face, twisted with that look of disappointment she's worn for years. As if me existing was some kind of failed investment. They never saw how much I covered. Phone bills, water bills. That 1 month, Greg maxed out their credit and needed help just until payday. I used to think that if I did more, gave more, they'd finally say thank you. They never did. By the end of the week, I've started apartment hunting. Or, more accurately, crappy studio hunting. Everything costs twice what I've got. I eat gas station sandwiches and keep applying for side gigs, brake pads, oil changes, tire rotations, anything that pays under the table. On Saturday, I find a place. It's half a garage, technically listed as a converted bachelor studio. The landlord's this grizzled guy named Earl with nicotine fingers and zero small talk. You pay. You stay, he mutters, then tosses me the keys. No deposit, no lease, just $300 a month, and don't bring no drama. I'm not sure what counts as drama, but I nod like I know. Inside, the place is a mess. The walls are cracked, the windows stuck half shut, and the toilet groans like it's seen war. But there's electricity, and the mini fridge hums. I lay out my sleeping bag on the floor and exhale for the first time all week. It's mine, broken and bare, but mine. By the second week, I've managed to get a thrift store futon, a secondhand microwave, and one of those $3 shrugs that smells like it's seen too many cats. The place is still a mess, but it's becoming a mess I recognize. I work late, overtime at the shop, side jobs, Craigslist fixes. I don't see Ezra much, he's got his own ghosts, but we talk over diner coffee when we can. You ever miss them? He asks once. I sip my coffee, bitter and lukewarm. I miss the version of them I thought I had. He just nods. Then a text. Brooke, hey, just so you know, Mom's crying every day. You really broke her. You could have at least said thanks before you left. Thanks? The first stare at the screen, my thumb hovering. I want to write, thanks for what? Kicking me out? Gaslighting me into thinking I was the problem? Draining my account while calling me a failure? But I don't. I just block her. I sit back on the futon. Let the silence hang in the air. It's not revenge. Not yet. But it's a start, because if they thought cutting me off would be the end of my story, they're about to find out what happens when the scapegoat stops playing along. Ezra's couch was a temporary fix, and I knew it. After 2 weeks, the springs in that thing started leaving marks on my back, and I couldn't take waking up every morning to the smell of cat food and stale beer. I thanked him, left $50 on the counter, and drove straight to the garage apartment Earl had shown me. It wasn't much actually, it was less than that, but it had 4 walls and a door that locked. That was enough for now. I spent my first night there sitting cross-legged on the futon, flipping through a box of old receipts and pay stubs I'd saved, without knowing why. Some were for things I barely remembered buying Brooke's birthday cake one year, a water heater part Greg claimed he'd reimburse me for, which of course never happened. Each scrap of paper felt heavier now, like proof that I hadn't imagined it all. For a long time, I thought if I just kept showing up, kept helping, eventually they'd see me. Not anymore. Work at the shop picked up. I started volunteering for the late shifts, less talking, more turning wrenches. I liked the way engines didn't lie. If something was broken, it told you. If you fixed it, it worked. Simple. Clean. The guys at the shop weren't close friends, not really, but there was a kind of quiet respect between us. Carlos taught me how to align rotors faster, and Pete slipped me a contact for off-the-book side work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. After a few weeks, I managed to save enough to buy a used dresser and a space heater that didn't buzz like a swarm of bees. Slowly, the apartment started to feel like mine. I found an old TV at a pawn shop and hooked it up to a streaming stick. Most nights, I'd eat canned chili on the futon and let sitcoms play in the background, just to fill the silence. Then came the voicemail. It was Greg, surprisingly. I hadn't heard his voice since the night I left. He didn't even say hello, just launched in like he was picking up a conversation I'd interrupted. Truck payment bounced, he said. Don't know what's going on with the bank, but I need you to call me back, ASAP. I didn't. Instead, I opened my banking app and stared at the payment history. Sure enough, the automatic withdrawals for his truck loan had stopped because I'd stopped them. After 4 years of covering that loan without a single thank you, I was done. Let them feel the weight for once. Still, the message stuck with me, not out of guilt, more like disbelief. That after everything, his first instinct was to call me, not to ask if I was okay, but to ask why the gravy train dried up. I didn't respond, but something in me shifted. It wasn't enough to walk away anymore. I wanted them to see the truth, not through rage, not through some dramatic showdown, but through silence and receipts. Let them explain that to the world. The next weekend, I went through every folder and email I had, pulling together every dime I'd spent on them. It took hours, but I didn't stop until I had it all organized. Spreadsheets, screenshots, bank transfers, Zelle payments, Venmo history. I built a digital paper trail that told a very different story than the one Brooke had posted on social media. Her caption, "Some people leave when it's convenient." That's not family still echoed in my head. But I had facts, hard numbers, and the truth didn't need hashtags. I kept working, not just at the shop, but on myself. I started eating better. Not perfect, still lots of microwave burritos, but I cut back on energy drinks and started jogging in the mornings. The air helped clear my head. I stopped checking their socials. No more doom scrolling through Brooke's fake inspirational quotes or Mom's filtered snapshots of her beautiful family. They looked like a postcard, clean, smiling, unbothered. But I knew the truth behind that tablecloth. I'd lived it. About a month after Greg's voicemail, I got another call, this time from Brooke. I didn't answer, but she left a message. "Mom says we might lose the truck. That Dad's freaking out. Look, I know things got messy, but can you just help out this one time? Please, Mason." That word, please. It didn't sound like her, and it didn't sound like an apology either. Just desperation in a new costume. I let the message sit. Didn't delete it. Didn't respond either. Instead, I kept building. Fixing more cars, saving more money, repairing the busted coffee table someone had left by the dumpster. I stripped the wood, repainted it, gave it new life. Every project became a metaphor. I was rebuilding everything. My space, my identity, my peace. Ezra noticed. One night after closing, he tossed me a beer and said, "You've been different lately. Lighter." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just said, "Less baggage." He nodded, and that was that. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. I hadn't decided what to do with the files I'd collected, but I knew I'd use them, not to destroy anyone, just to defend myself, to tell my side of the story if they ever tried to bury me again. And I had a feeling they would. The feeling came true sooner than expected. A week later, Carlos sent me a screenshot. Brooke again. Another post. This time, it was a picture of Mom, red-eyed at the kitchen table, captioned, "When your own son disappears and leaves you to pick up the pieces, pray for us." The comments were filled with sympathy. Strangers telling her how strong she was. People offering to drop off meals. Someone even Venmo'd her money. I sat there staring at the screen, stunned. They weren't just lying privately anymore, they were turning me into a villain for sympathy clout. And maybe the old me would have stayed quiet, would have hoped someone, somewhere would stand up for me. But not now. This version of me didn't need validation. I needed justice. Not revenge for its own sake, but to reclaim the truth. So I drafted a post. Just the facts. A thread laid out like a timeline. No insults. No rage. Just receipts. Years of payments. Messages where they asked for help. Screenshots of Brooke thanking me when I saved their lights from getting shut off. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't at them. Just posted and left it. Quiet. Controlled. True. I shut my phone off and went for a ride. The bike I'd been working on was finally running barely, but it ran. I took it down the side roads, let the wind drown out the noise in my head. When I got back, my phone had blown up. Carlos messaged first. "Dude, your post? It's everywhere." Ezra had texted too. They messed with the wrong mechanic. And Brooke? She was losing it in the comments. Spamming responses like, "That's not what happened. And he's twisting everything." But people had already seen the truth. And this time they weren't buying her story. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of their house. I didn't wake up with clenched fists or a knot in my chest. I just slept. The post didn't fix everything. Mom didn't call. Greg didn't apologize. Brooke deleted her account for a few days and came back with a cryptic quote about loyalty. But none of that mattered, because for once, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the family scapegoat, the fallback wallet, the punchline at their pity party. I was just Mason, a man who walked away, found a new life, and finally stood up for himself. And that was only the beginning. The days that followed my post felt oddly still, like the air just after a storm. At the shop, no one said much about it except Carlos, who slapped me on the back and grinned like I'd just scored a touchdown. "Took guts, man," he said while tightening a belt on a minivan. "You finally said what needed to be said." I gave a small nod and kept working. But inside, something was different. Not loud, not flashy, just steady. It was like I'd finally leveled the field. Not because they admitted anything they wouldn't, but because I stopped needing them to. That silence I used to hate, it felt cleaner now. Not empty, peaceful. Work became my anchor again. I'd show up early, leave late, and spend the in-between moments fine-tuning the bike or chatting with Ezra, who'd begun opening up about his own family drama, ex-wife, estranged daughter, all of it complicated. Maybe that's why he never judged me. He understood what it felt like to be replaced, rewritten. On Saturdays, we'd split a six-pack and sit in the alley behind the shop, not talking much, just listening to the hum of the city and letting the quiet fill in the cracks. The apartment started changing too. Not just with furniture. I'd picked up a table that didn't wobble and a small bookshelf, but with energy. I lit candles, bought a second pillow, even painted one wall a soft blue, just because it made me feel like I was somewhere else, somewhere better. I stopped checking Brooke's page. I stopped wondering if Mom ever read the post. None of it mattered now. The story was out. The damage done was their own reflection, and I had no plans to polish it for them. Then came the letter. A real one. In the mail. It showed up in a torn envelope, addressed in my mom's handwriting. Inside was a single page, short and cold. Mason, you embarrassed the family. Whatever grievances you had should have stayed private. You hurt your sister. You hurt me. I hope you find peace, but please don't contact us again. No love, Mom. No signature. Just the paper equivalent of a slammed door. I read it twice and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a deep, hollow confirmation of what I already knew: they were never going to take responsibility. Not once. I folded it neatly and dropped it into the drawer with the rest of the receipts. Another artifact of who they chose to be. By now, the bike was running smooth. I started riding it out of town on weekends, just far enough to feel like the past couldn't reach me. One Sunday, I stopped by a roadside coffee stand an hour east, and that's where I met her. Her name was Cam, short for Camille. She worked the stand alone, wore flannel-like armor, and handed me my drink without the fake smile most baristas wear. "Nice ride," she said, nodding at the Yamaha. I told her I rebuilt it, and something shifted in her eyes. Respect, maybe. Recognition. Whatever it was, it made me come back the next weekend. And the one after that. We started talking more. She liked old horror movies, could name every model of truck by its headlight design, and had this way of asking questions that didn't feel nosy, just curious, real. I didn't tell her everything right away, but eventually I shared pieces. She listened. Didn't flinch when I said my mom called me a drain, or when I explained how I'd been paying off someone else's truck since I was 19. She just said, "Sounds like you've been more of a dad than Greg ever was," and went back to wiping the counter. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. Cam wasn't the reason I got better, but she was proof that good people existed. That not everyone needed you to break just so they could feel whole. We started meeting halfway between her town and mine. She'd bring sandwiches. I'd bring tools in case her old Bronco acted up. Sometimes we just sat on the tailgate and watched the wind stir the fields, saying nothing. For once, silence didn't hurt. It healed. About 2 months after the post went viral, well, semi-viral, I got a message on Facebook from a name I didn't expect. My aunt, my mom's sister. We hadn't talked in years. She messaged, "I saw your post. I always knew something wasn't right with how they treated you. I'm sorry, Mason. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I sat with that message for a full day. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I realized she might have been the first adult in my life to acknowledge it. I wrote back eventually. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple thank you. That opened a new door quietly. A few days later, she called. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me stories about my dad, ones I hadn't heard before. About how he used to carry me on his shoulders through Home Depot, how he'd take apart the toaster just to teach me how it worked. It was like recovering lost pieces of myself. And then she asked the question I'd been dreading. Would you ever consider coming back? Not to them, just to visit. The neighborhood? Maybe Dad's grave? I froze for a moment, then said maybe, one day. And I meant it, but not yet. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I started a side hustle, fixing up old bikes and listing them online. People started coming to me with junkers, and I'd bring them back to life. Word spread. Ezra even helped me set up a little website. "You're building something," he said one night. "Not just engines. A whole new chapter." I didn't say it out loud, but I knew he was right. One night, as I was locking up the shop, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "You think you're better than us now?" No name, but I knew who it was. Brooke. No one else would phrase it like that. I didn't answer. I deleted the message and added the number to my block list. Not because I was scared, but because I had outgrown the game. If they wanted to lash out, let them. I wasn't standing in the blast zone anymore. Life wasn't perfect. The apartment still rattled in the wind. My bank balance still dipped too low too often. And sometimes I'd catch myself staring at my phone, half expecting another cheap shot from the past. But the difference was, I no longer bent under it. I stood taller, talked slower, chose silence not as surrender but as strength. And one day, standing in line at the hardware store, I heard someone call my name. I turned. It was Kyle, my half-brother, the one who'd once muttered good riddance as I was thrown out the front door. He looked older, thinner. His face carried that quiet look of someone who'd finally seen the truth, or at least part of it. "Hey," he said. Awkward. I saw your post a while back." I nodded, not saying anything. He shifted his weight, holding a box of nails. "I didn't know all of that. I mean, I guess I knew some, but not the whole thing. Still, I said nothing. Finally, he said it. I'm sorry, Mason, for how I acted, for not sticking up for you. It wasn't everything, but it was something. I looked at him and just said, thanks, then turned back to the cashier. I didn't need more than that. I wasn't looking for redemption from them. I already had it from myself. And that's the part no one tells you. Revenge doesn't always come with flames or fallout. Sometimes it looks like living well, like healing, like rebuilding the life they tried to burn. And when they finally see it, when they realize you're thriving without them, that's the loudest silence you'll ever hear. The thing about rebuilding a life is that it never looks like the one you left behind. And that's the point. Mine wasn't big or flashy or wrapped in apology cards from the people who hurt me, but it was solid. Day by day, routine by routine, I was stacking moments that belonged to me. The apartment, though still small and drafty, had grown warmer somehow. The tools lined up on my wall were no longer reminders of what I'd done for others, but proof of what I could do for myself. Every bike I fixed, every dollar I earned, every quiet night without a fight was a kind of freedom. Cam and I hadn't put a label on anything, but whatever we had was steady. She came by more often now, her Bronco rumbling into the alley behind my place just after sunset, headlights catching on the chipped bricks. She'd lean against the doorway with her boots crossed and ask about my latest project. And I'd lose track of time explaining the intricacies of a carburetor or how I'd stripped a frame down to the bolts just to get it breathing again. She listened like it mattered, like I mattered. That kind of presence makes you realize how loud absence can be. Business was picking up too. Between referrals and the website Ezra helped build, I started getting calls from people outside our town. Rioters with busted bikes, small garages needing backup, even a high school shop teacher who asked if I'd do a guest demo on engine tuning. I didn't say yes right away. Me? Teach? But Cam nudged me. You're more than just hands, she said. People learn from stories too, so I did it. And it wasn't perfect. I stumbled a few times, forgot a torque spec mid-sentence. But the kids watched, asked questions, respected the grease under my nails. It felt good, like I was handing down something real. Not just a skill, but a mindset. That you can take what's broken, rebuild it, and come out stronger. One evening, after a long day at the shop, I got a call from Earl, my grizzled landlord. You got mail, he grunted. Looks important. Legal-looking envelope. My stomach nodded. I hadn't heard from any of them in weeks, maybe months. I drove over and sure enough, there it was. Thick envelope, cream-colored, my name typed in all caps. From a law office 2 counties over. I opened it slowly, hands steady, eyes scanning each line. It was from Greg, or rather, his lawyer. Apparently, the truck I stopped paying for had been repossessed and sold at auction for less than what was owed, and now Greg was suing me for the remaining balance. According to them, I had verbally agreed to cover the loan in full. No contract, no paperwork, just years of misplaced trust. I read it twice, not out of fear, but disbelief. He really thought he could spin the story again, repaint me as the irresponsible one, the abandoner, the villain. I didn't panic. I called a local attorney Ezra recommended. The guy was blunt, a little gruff, but sharp. They don't have a case, he said after reviewing everything. And if they try to take this to court, we'll bury them in documentation. And we did. Every payment I'd made, every month I covered without missing a beat. Every message I saved from Greg saying thanks or you saved us again. My lawyer filed a countersuit, just to make it clear I wasn't bluffing. A few weeks later, we got a quiet email. Case dropped. No apology, no explanation, just silence. But that silence, that was enough. Because I knew it meant they finally realized I wasn't the same kid they kicked out. I was someone they couldn't control anymore. Not long after that, the shop owner, Mr. Davis, a guy who usually kept to himself and only ever spoke in 2-word instructions, pulled me aside. You ever think about running your own place? He asked, wiping oil from his fingers. I blinked. Maybe someday, I said, half laughing. But he just nodded. You're ready. Think about it. And I did. For days. Nights. In between jobs and rides and coffee with Cam. I kept picturing it my own sign, my own name on the door. A space where I didn't just fix bikes but taught others how to. A place built from scratch, not borrowed or begged for. I started scouting locations. Found a rundown auto yard near the edge of town, abandoned but solid. The rent was steep, but I had savings now. Clients. A reputation. I ran the numbers. It would be tight, but possible. And when I showed Cam the place, she just grinned and said, "You already know you're doing it, so stop pretending it's a question." While I worked on permits and loan paperwork, I kept the apartment running, the shop humming, the connections growing. Kyle reached out again, this time with something heavier in his tone. He didn't ask for anything, just said he was sorry again. Said Mom wasn't doing well, that the weight of it all seemed to be sinking in, that she missed me. I didn't respond, I wasn't ready. But I didn't block him either. And that silence? That was its own kind of forgiveness. Quiet, slow, real. Opening day at the new garage came quicker than expected. A dusty sign reading Mason's Rebuilds hung above the door, hand-painted by a friend of Cam's. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I invited the guys from the old shop, a few past clients, even the shop teacher in his class. Cam brought coffee and donuts. Ezra brought beer. Mr. Davis showed up, nodded once, and handed me a set of custom sockets as a gift. "Now you're the boss," he said. It didn't feel like a ceremony. It felt like breath after being underwater too long. Like I'd finally stepped into something I didn't have to apologize for. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the garage. The air smelled of fresh paint and warm steel. I turned the lights off, leaned against the workbench, and just breathed. Not because I was tired, but because I'd made it. I didn't win the way people think revenge looks. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic confrontations, just quiet choices, clear boundaries, truth told plainly. That was the victory. I had nothing left to prove to them. Not because they believed me now, but because I no longer needed them to. When I got home, I found a letter taped to my door, folded neatly, handwritten. It was from Mom. Just a few lines. "I know I failed you. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I wanted you to know I see it now. Everything you did, everything the first refused to see. I'm sorry. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble." I sat on the couch and read it again. Then I placed it next to her first letter in the drawer. They sat side by side like bookends of two very different people. One who blamed, one who finally looked inward. I didn't call her. Not yet. But I thought about it. Maybe one day. For now, I had enough. A business, a bike, a girl who saw through the noise, and peace earned, not given. I walked out onto the porch, cool air brushing my face, and looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the past. I felt like I was walking towards something real. The shop felt different once it became mine. There was a strange kind of stillness at night. After the last client left and the tools were cleaned and shelved, I'd stand in the center of that space, oil-stained floors beneath me, the smell of grease and rubber in the air, and it would hit me I did this. I built something out of nothing, out of the scraps they left behind. Business grew faster than I expected. Word of mouth spread, especially after a custom Harley I rebuilt, ended up featured in a local bike magazine. They called me a rising name in classic rebuilds, and for the first time in my life, someone described me with pride instead of pity. I hired 2 part-timers, kids from the local tech school. One of them, Leo, reminded me of myself at 19, quiet, hungry to learn, a little rough around the edges. I made sure he knew this place wasn't just about fixing machines. It was about fixing your own sense of worth, one bolt at a time. Cam kept showing up too, not just as support, but as part of the rhythm. She'd bring takeout on the late nights, roll up her sleeves, and help me organize parts. She even started helping me manage scheduling and orders, turning my mess of a calendar into something that actually worked. We never said we were anything official, but people started calling her my girl, and neither of us corrected them. There was comfort in her silence, the way she never tried to fix me, just stood beside me while I figured it out on my own. It felt earned, real, like the rest of my life finally matching the rhythm of who I was becoming. Then came the voicemail, again, this time from a number I hadn't seen in years, my grandfather's landline. I didn't even know he still had it. My heart stuttered before I hit play. His voice came through scratchy but sharp. "Mason, I heard some things. I'd like to see you. Come by if you're willing." That was it. No scolding, no sugar, Just a quiet request from a man who'd been a ghost in my life for years. I barely remembered him. He distanced himself from my mom's chaos long ago, moved out to the edge of the state where phone service was spotty and letters were still a thing. I thought about it for a while, didn't tell Cam. Just took a day off work, got on the bike, and rode 3 hours through back roads and forgotten towns until I reached his place. It was a cabin, not a house, tucked behind a ridge, surrounded by trees that looked older than time. He met me on the porch. Same frame as my mom, same eyes, but none of the fire, just tired, deliberate calm. We sat on his porch in silence for a while. He offered me coffee, black, no sugar. Then he said, "Your mom told me her side. I wanted to hear yours, but I figured I should wait until you weren't full of fire." I didn't argue, just told him the truth. What I paid, what they said, how they kicked me out, how they turned me into a villain just because I finally stopped bleeding for them. He didn't interrupt, just nodded, jaw tightening with every new detail. When I finished, he said something I didn't expect. "She was always loudest when she was wrong. I should have stepped in. That's on me." It didn't fix anything, but it meant something. Not everyone in that family had chosen silence. Before I left, he handed me an envelope. "This was meant for you when you were 21. She never gave it to you. Figured you'd want to decide what to do with it now." Inside was a deed, a plot of land just an acre registered in my name. He'd bought it years ago. Said it wasn't much, but it was something solid. Something that couldn't be taken or rewritten. I stood there, stunned. It wasn't about the land, it was the acknowledgement. The first piece of legacy handed to me not out of guilt, but intention. I rode home under a dusk that looked like a painting. The wind colder than usual, but it didn't bite. It cleared me. Back in town, I pulled into the shop just as Cam was locking up. She turned, eyes scanning my face. "You all right?" I nodded. Then I handed her the deed. Her eyebrows rose. "Guess we've got space to build a second shop someday," I said. She smiled. "Or maybe just a porch to sit on when we're old." That was the first time she hinted at forever, and I didn't flinch. I liked the sound of that future. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at the shop. From Kyle. This time handwritten. Short. Honest. "Mom's not well. She talks about you more than she used to. Says she regrets things. I think she means it, but I don't know if it matters anymore. I'm not asking for anything, I just thought you should know." I read it 3 times. The old me would have dropped everything, rushed back, tried to save what was already dust. But this version of me knew better. You can't save people from truths they refuse to face when it mattered. Still, I sat with the letter, let it exist without judgment. Later that night, while I was locking up, a familiar car pulled into the lot. The kind of minivan I'd filled with groceries more times than I could count. The driver's window rolled down. It was Mom. She looked older, smaller, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look unfinished. She didn't get out, just sat there, engine humming. I walked over, slow, careful. She didn't speak right away. Then finally, I didn't come to fight. I nodded. "Then don't." She looked down at her hands, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping her steady. "I read your post. All of it." I kept reading it, actually. Couldn't stop. I stayed quiet, she went on. "I blamed you because it was easier than blaming myself. And I let Greg feed that version of the story because it made me feel less like I failed. But I did. I failed you. I know that now." Her voice cracked on the last part. No performance, just regret. Real, raw. Too late, but finally true. I didn't forgive her. Not in that moment, but I didn't shut her out either. "I'm not who I was back then," I said. "I'm not angry anymore. But I'm also not coming back." She nodded slowly. "I didn't expect you to. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I see you." That part hit, not because it fixed anything, but because I'd waited my whole life to be seen by her. And now that I didn't need it, it finally came. She drove away without asking for anything. No favor, no hug. Just left. And that felt right. Back inside, Cam was waiting. I told her everything. She didn't say, "You should call her or maybe you two can fix it." She just said, "That's a heavy thing to carry, but you don't have to carry it alone." I held her hand. Rough fingers wrapped around something steady and breathed easier. In the following weeks, I buried myself in work. Not to escape, but to honor the space I fought for. Leo was getting better with carburetors. The second part-timer, Sam, was learning suspension tuning like he was born with a wrench in his hand. I watched them and remembered how far I'd come. Every part of this place echoed my choices, my effort, not theirs. And that's the truth about revenge no one talks about. The real revenge isn't about burning bridges or watching them crumble. It's in rising so far above the lies they told about you that they have no choice but to look up and finally see the truth they denied for so long. I wasn't angry anymore. I was beyond it. But I hadn't forgotten, and that made all the difference. It was late fall when I realized I hadn't thought about them in days. Not Mom, not Greg, not the house I left behind. The cold had crept into the mornings, and the shop heaters kicked on automatically now, humming low as I prepped for the day. Business was steady. Sam had started bringing in his own small client base, and Leo was managing engine rebuilds without double-checking every step. I'd become the kind of man people trusted, not just with their machines, but with their time, their questions, their stories. I caught myself smiling more often, not out of relief, not from spite, but because the silence I once feared had turned into something sacred. Peace. Not the fake kind that sits on family photo walls, but the kind you build piece by piece through choices no one else sees. Cam had moved in by then. It happened quietly, like everything between us. She started keeping a drawer at my place. Then her favorite coffee mug showed up next to mine, and one night she brought over her record player and said, "Hope you don't mind." And I said, "I was hoping you would." She didn't ask about marriage. I didn't push for timelines. We existed in a rhythm that felt whole without needing a label. Some nights we'd ride out to the old lot where the land my grandfather left me sat, untouched and overgrown. She'd lean against the Bronco and sip coffee while I stared at the horizon. "You ever think about building something out here?" she asked once. I did. Not a shop, not a business, just a home. A space that didn't carry echoes of slammed doors and accusations. A place that started clean and stayed that way because it was built on truth, not obligation. The letter came around Christmas, this time from Kyle. He didn't ask for anything, just wrote about how things had changed. Greg had moved out a few months ago. Apparently he'd gambled away most of what they had left. Brooke was working 2 jobs and still blaming everyone else. Mom had started volunteering at a shelter, said it helped her stop thinking about herself so much. "She talks about you like you're a ghost," Kyle wrote. A mix of shame and hope. I don't think she knows what she's hoping for. I folded the letter and placed it with the others. My drawer of unfinished stories. I didn't feel sad, I felt distance. Like I'd climbed a mountain they refused to admit was even there, and now I could finally see the view. New Year's Eve was quiet. Cam and I didn't go out. We stayed in, grilled steaks, watched an old movie, and fell asleep before midnight. When I woke up, she was already at the window, looking out. "You ever think about what would have happened if you stayed?" she asked without turning around. I thought, for a second, yeah, I'd still be invisible. She looked back at me, nodded, then said, "You're not anymore." And that stuck with me. Not just because it was true, but because I didn't need to hear it to believe it. I already knew. By spring, the shop was thriving. I brought on a 3rd apprentice. Started hosting weekend classes for local teens. Called it Wrenches and Wisdom, mostly because Ezra joked that I sounded like a dad and it made us both laugh. But the classes filled up. Parents dropped their kids off and thanked me. One dad even said, "You're doing something good here, real good." And I believed him, not because I needed the validation, but because the work spoke for itself. One morning while reviewing inventory, Cam handed me an envelope. No stamp, no return address, just my name, written in careful, slow handwriting. I opened it. It was from Mom, again. But this time, no begging, no self-pity, just one page. "I watched your interview, the one in the magazine. You looked proud. I didn't recognize you at first, but then I did. The boy who used to fix my hair dryer before school. The one who stayed quiet when we blamed him for things we couldn't admit. I didn't say it when it mattered, but I'm proud of you. I hope someday, if there's room, you'll let me say that to your face." I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just sat down and read it again. For once, her words didn't sting. They didn't try to manipulate or excuse. They just existed, and I let them. Later that night, Cam found me outside, hands buried in the soil next to the porch, planting the small pine sapling we picked up last week. Another metaphor? She teased. I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of seeing empty space. We sat on the steps as the wind shifted around us. The tree stood small and certain in the dirt. I didn't know if it would take root, if the soil would welcome it, but I planted it anyway. Some things are worth giving a chance even if they never ask for it. Months passed. Then a year. I didn't see Mom, but I heard from her every so often. A birthday card, a donation to the shop's youth program, a note on Veterans Day thanking me for helping Greg that year before things got bad. She never pushed, never called, just left pieces of herself like someone tiptoeing toward the edge of an apology without demanding a response. And that was enough for me. I didn't need her to fall at my feet. I just needed the echo of her voice to finally match the truth of what happened. And slowly it did. The day I finally drove out to that land alone, I brought a toolbox and a folding chair. Nothing else. Just sat there, hands on my knees, looking out at the horizon. I thought about that boy who used to fix things for everyone else, hoping they'd see him, hoping they'd love him if he just gave enough. And I let that boy go, not with anger, with gratitude. Because he survived, he became me. And I'm not invisible anymore. I stayed until the sun started to drop, orange light cutting through the trees like memory. Then I stood, brushed the dirt from my jeans, and packed up. As I slid into the truck, I looked at the land one last time and said out loud, "You didn't win." I did. Not to anyone. Just to the wind. Back home, Cam was waiting on the porch. She didn't ask where I'd been. Just handed me a glass of lemonade and leaned into my shoulder. The neighbors' kids were playing in the yard next door. The wind chimes we bought last fall were ringing low and steady. And in that moment, I knew this was it. This was what peace looked like, not a reward, a choice. One I made every day. I didn't look back. They used to say I walked out on my family. But the truth is, I walked back into myself. I found the boy I used to be, the man I became, and the life they never believed I could build. And that right there is the ending they'll never get to rewrite. Story 2, when someone has been buried alive by a falsehood, I had no more space for terror. The quiet they select for themselves is the only thing that hurts them. And I, Abigail Callahan, had had enough of my silence. I entered a lawyer's office in downtown Vancouver on Monday morning, carrying a bulky briefcase and wearing an expression devoid of emotion. The workplace was compact, uncomplicated, and neat. Through the glass panes came the filtered sunlight, settling on the file I had brought. Each page contains a fragment of my life, living evidence that I never died the manner they said I did. Attorney Jacob Miles was the one who met me. A young man in his early 30s with thin-rimmed spectacles and well-groomed brown hair. I spread out the papers in my briefcase on the table. He only sat still, his eyes wide and without blinking. I pushed forward the U.S. passport that was frequently stamped from Vancouver and Seattle and stated, "This is my passport. Toronto. These are my pay stubs, rental agreements, tax returns, and Canadian residence card, all of which date from the same period." Officials in Oregon reported me dead. Jacob rapidly skimmed through a few pages before turning to face me. "Are you claiming that you were wrongfully pronounced dead?" My relatives exploited my nod to give my sister, Emily Callahan, all of my possessions. In addition to my own possessions, I also have some shares in the business I used to work for and my grandparents' inheritance money. He rubbed his forehead while leaning back in his chair. "This is unlike anything I've ever dealt with. I don't need you to be surprised," I said in an oddly composed tone. "Please assist me in taking back my identity and, if you can, in holding those responsible for this accountable." He nodded after taking a deep breath out. "First, we'll submit a petition to have the death certificate revoked concurrently. I'll get in touch with the state authorities in Oregon and start getting ready to file a case for inheritance abuse and document fraud." However, he paused. "It won't be a quick procedure. Months may pass." I steadied my gaze and glanced up at him. "They're having a memorial service for me this weekend, so I don't have any months." They had already conducted a funeral when Jacob froze a monument. I am aware. I smiled sourly, but obviously one fictitious funeral wasn't sufficient. A second performance is what they desire, larger, more widely known. And I'll be there to see them perform this time. I got a message from an unknown number the same evening. No greeting, no name. Only one line. Abigail Callahan Memorial, Portland St. Luke Church on Sunday. My pulse was racing as I gazed at the message. My parents used to take annual family Christmas pictures at St. Luke, the church where I used to sing in the children's choir. They decided to keep the hoax going there, a hallowed space brimming with memories, now transformed into a platform for their fictitious sorrow. City lights were reflected on the glass within me as I stood near the window. Certainly there was no anger, just a chilly clarity. I had been thrown away, deleted, and replaced. But I would go back today. Not to say sorry, not to beg. I'd come back to get the truth. A freelance writer with experience covering intricate inheritance litigation was engaged by me. I provided her with all the documents, including the fraudulently transferred estate papers and the falsified death certificate. She pledged to conceal my identity until the appropriate time to reveal the truth. I simply said one thing: let me give you that chance. I also wore a long, fitted black coat that was understated yet sophisticated. To fit the part, I would play at the memorial, not as a disguise. The one from The Forgotten Who Came Back. I had no idea who would be there that day. Old acquaintances and relatives, individuals who ignored me without saying a word. However, I was certain of one thing: it was a day they would never forget. The reason for this is not the pre-written eulogies, but rather the fact that I would unexpectedly enter and reveal the reality that had been hidden for 3 years. The sky over Portland seemed strangely gloomy that morning, as though the city was lowering its head to something or someone. A little drizzle fell. Across the narrow street, I gazed at St. Luke Church, the site of my family's recollections of me from my early years. The lights in the cathedral were blazing. The entryway was lined with luxury vehicles. Individuals wearing elegant black clothing came in with expressions of pure sadness. But I understood that nobody really hurt behind that moral facade. After fastening the last button and pulling up the collar of my coat, I walked gently across the street. The door was partly open, but the service had already begun inside. Amazing Grace was sung by the choir, which I heard. The tragedy was perfectly framed by the angelic voices that reverberated throughout the hallowed area. The world was supposed to believe them. A man stood as the song came to a conclusion. My dad, Abigail. She had a complex personality. His voice was clear but slow as he started. She was difficult to understand at times. However, we adored her. We exerted every effort. With her eyes red and her handkerchief in hand, my mother sat below. As though memories were coming back to her, she nodded softly with every word he spoke. However, I was aware that this was merely a scene from a script that they had practiced. Okay. My hand touched the heavy wooden door. With a loud moan that reverberated throughout the cathedral, he took a deep breath and pulled the door open. Outside light streamed in like a chill wind through the crowded seats. The room was filled with murmurs. While some gazed, others turned. Then, in shock, one voice coughed, broke the quiet. "Is that Abigail? My God." With every step I took, firm yet slow, the sound of my heels on the stone floor echoed like drum beats in their chests. I didn't glance at anyone, didn't need to say anything. My appearance alone was the solution to every question they had avoided for the previous 3 years. As they approached the middle aisle, the whole church fell into utter quiet. My mother stood quickly, lips trembling, eyes bulging, then slumped, her body limp in Aunt Margaret's arms. A beautiful faint, possibly prepared in her thoughts many times. At the pulpit, my father remained still, lips moving but formed, eyes wide. Nothing to say. With a harsh, dry thud, the microphone fell from his grasp and struck Emily and the sound system. With a glass of red wine in her hand, my sister stood close to the white flower arrangements. I could see it plainly as we looked at one another. Fear. Not an act, but a genuine dread. The wine spilled over her ivory silk dress because her hand was shaking so much. The cloth was covered in a scarlet stain that looked like blood. I entered the platform and stood just where they had bid farewell to a living person. I turned to see the faces of the audience that I never imagined seeing again. I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to cry. All I needed was the truth. I was told I had passed away. I started off in a firm, steady voice. As you can see, though, I'm still here, real, living, and prepared, to be honest. Nobody said anything. A few sat still. Some phones started to ascend, blinking red recording lights in the illumination of the chapel. Excellent. Show the world. I opened the prepared file. My passport is this. These are my lease docs for Canada. These are my tax returns. My work agreements. These official records demonstrate that I never passed away. Regardless of the death certificate that was filed, I looked down at my dad, who was now seated quietly in the front pew with his eyes focused on the ground. I was removed from my family and wrongfully reported dead, and my sister received all of my possessions when I vanished. Everything that used to belong to me now shared between the real estate firm and inheritance funds. I held up my hand as Emily attempted to speak. Don't. Not right now. You were allowed to talk for 3 years. I surveyed the church gathering, all eyes. Friends, family, and those who formerly professed to care. They couldn't look at me, so they bowed their heads. I added in a deeper voice, "This isn't a memorial. It's a performance. Unfortunately for you, though, the curtain is going to fall, and the audience has awakened today." I shut the folder. It was lighter in my chest. I didn't have to elaborate. I had returned, not just physically, but also with an indisputable truth. File in hand, I stood in the center of St. Luke's Church, my eyes like a sword slicing through the space. No more hymns, no more phony sniffles. Only the oppressive quiet of individuals pulled from a dream they believed they were in control of. I held up the documents while speaking in a clear, purposeful voice that spoke to everyone in the room. In Spain, there were 0 auto accidents, no brain damage, no highway crash, and most definitely no Abigail Callahan's death. It's been 3 years since I left North America. All of what you just heard is false. From the rear rows came gasps. A young woman's phone was raised, and I noticed that the camera light was blinking. Then another, and yet another. They couldn't erase the truth this time, since it was being filmed. My father was still keeping his head down when I turned and pointed directly at him. The phony death certificate was signed by you. To legitimize a death that never occurred, you filed it to the state of Oregon. It's all part of a scheme to destroy me, to silence a daughter who dared to expose the shortcomings in this family. After recovering from her fictitious breakdown, my mother firmly grasped Aunt Margaret's hand. She stared at me like I was a ghost, her eyes wild, her face pallid. "How about you?" Gazing directly into my mother's eyes, I spoke. I spoke in a calm but forceful tone. "You said nothing. You were aware of the reality. I did nothing wrong, as you knew. You allowed me to take the fall, though, and continued to spread the lie in order to keep Emily safe." I looked at my sister Emily, who used to sleep next to me on Christmas Eve and once held my hand as I walked to school, standing like a statue right now. Her perfect makeup was starting to smudge with tears and sweat, and her fists were gripping the stained hem of her dress. "You stole from the business. Almost $60,000. Our parents knew. I knew. But you blamed me rather than take responsibility, and they decided to remove me as if I had never been there. Nobody answered. Nobody ventured. After inhaling deeply, I opened the second folder. Copies of the death certificate were inside, transfers of assets, Canadian government-issued identity verifications, carefully organized, signed, and stamped bank statements, and no conjecture. Proof. These will be sent to the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office and the federal court. Persistent financial fraud, forgery, and asset seizure by taking advantage of a deceased person. And before you sell everything to repay it, Emily, you might be fortunate enough to keep a couple pairs of shoes. Behind me, there were gasps. This was whispered by Aunt Margaret. "This isn't possible." I spun around and gave her a direct look. "It's true. More than any event in this church's history." Then a man got to his feet. My father's younger brother, my Uncle Frank. He moved forward and gave me a startled look. "We thought we really did, Abigail. Nobody called to see how I was doing." I interrupted him. Nobody sent a text. Nobody sent an email. Just one message. One. However, you all chose to remain silent. And you are complicit because of your silence. I nodded slightly and set the last folder on the pulpit. All I need is this. The rest I leave to the law. I stepped down the stairs, walking the center aisle. Every eye followed me. Some stunned, some averted, some still recording, following every step, like a real-life documentary. When I pushed the church doors open, the afternoon light hit my face. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because behind me the curtain of lies had fallen, and I knew from that moment forward they could never put the play back together. The last light of the afternoon poured down the steps of St. Luke's Church as I walked outside. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and the musty wood from the old saint statue by the yard, but I felt nothing except the relief spreading through me light, as if a stone had been lifted from my chest after 3 crushing years. Behind me the church door hadn't yet closed. I heard the movement of feet, wild murmurs, and someone weeping. Maybe my mother, maybe Emily. But for the first time in years, I didn't glance back. I didn't need to know what they thought. I didn't need to hear whatever tale they'd construct to excuse what they'd done, what needed to be said. I'd stated what needed to be demonstrated. I'd proven. The remainder now belongs to justice. The next day, I sat at Attorney Jacob Miles's office. The scars from my hefty suitcase were faint on my hand. He meticulously sorted each paper into designated folders, nodding as he scrutinized each seal and signature. "Everything's in order," he remarked quietly. "The petition to invalidate the death certificate has been presented to the state court, along with cases for document fraud, asset seizure, and false reporting." I nodded, saying nothing. I didn't feel triumphant now. It was made available. Jacob gave me a glance. "You know, after what they've done, very few people have the guts to confront their entire family." I grinned a little. I didn't return to save the day. Simply put, I didn't want to be buried by a lie. The Oregon Department of Vital Records sent me a notification 2 weeks later. My identity had been entirely restored and the dead status revoked. Abigail Elise Callahan, a straightforward name, was at last restored to its proper position within the system. No longer marked as dead. I didn't anticipate how quickly the news traveled. On social media, the church video was shared in chunks that became viral under the title. In just 3 days, the lady who entered her own monument and revealed a family secret had over 1 million views. Others came out to me, some doubting me, some admiring me. A few journalists are asking for exclusive interviews. I turned them all down. I had no desire for stardom. All I wanted was serenity. At the start of the next month, the formal inquiry got underway. My mother, father, and Emily were called in by the Multnomah County Prosecutor's Office to be questioned. They blocked bank accounts. Transfers of property are examined. The law now controlled something they had previously believed would remain concealed forever. I was not there at the initial hearing. I had the right to, according to my lawyer, but I was too sick of stares. The cycle of false morality serves as the rationale. Rather, I went back to Vancouver, the city that came to my rescue when everything else failed. I went into the bookshop where I used to work and gave the owner, Mrs. Ruth, who had once preserved my very first handwritten application for a job, a hug. "You returned," she murmured, her eyes sparkling. "No," I said, "I never left. I moved into a new apartment that was quieter, smaller, and had a balcony that overlooked the river. Every morning, I brewed coffee, listened to soothing classical music, and watched the sun sparkle on the ocean. No more bad dreams, no more fantasies about the past pursuing you. I didn't go back to extend forgiveness. They didn't have to apologize so late. Forgiveness is a gift after all. Furthermore, none of them merited it. I returned to assert my existence. And I felt really alive for the first time in years. Regaining one's identity isn't the only aspect of my narrative. It serves as a reminder that the truth is always important, even if you're buried deepest. The most crucial thing is to keep yourself from vanishing from your own existence in a world where a falsehood has the power to obliterate anyone. I didn't come back seeking praise or retribution. I returned to demonstrate that I am genuine and deserving of living my life as I see fit. How do you feel about Abigail's narrative and her decisions? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming and surprising family tales. My phone buzzed as I was about to brew coffee. A name I hadn't seen in a long time appeared on the screen. Our old Oregon neighbor, Miss S. Helen Dorsey. A beat skipped in my chest. The mere sight of that name evoked a wave of memories I had assumed had been buried for a long time. Like waves hitting a cliff, they crashed in. No context, no greeting. A brief message with an accompanying video. I just can't believe what I witnessed today, Abigail. My sincerest sympathies. I gave the video a tap. Although the coffee hasn't been prepared yet, my palms are already beginning to perspire. When the frame opened, I saw St. Mary's Church, which I used to go to every Christmas when I was a kid. Every stained glass window and candle appeared just as I had recalled. However, the mood was different. Somber, honorable, relaxing. Slowly, the camera approached the altar. There stood my parents. My mom was dressed in a black lace gown. She had a white handkerchief softly wiping at her eye and an ancient pearl necklace around her neck. My father was reading quietly from a piece of paper next to her. His voice was clear yet tremulous, and there was a coffin behind them. Beside it was a big picture of myself with white wreaths around it. I went cold. Abigail has always been a girl with problems. As though it had erupted in my mind, my father's words reverberated from the phone. But we adored her no matter what. We exerted every effort. My hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped the phone when I sat up straight. It was disbelief, not tears, that caused my vision to blur. I watched the video again. There was no dream here. It was not staged. They had painfully real faces, but there was no grief in their eyes. Real tears did not fall. It's very unfortunate that Abigail passed away so quickly, my mother added. All we can do is hope she's at peace. I was breathing and living. Rent is still paid each month, working in Seattle at a little bookshop. Nevertheless, they arranged a funeral for me. I gazed at the footage. A shiver is running up my back. It couldn't be an error. I hadn't disappeared, remained accident-free. I hadn't gone through anything significant that would have made folks believe I was gone. This was deliberate. My gaze remained fixed on the screen even after I put the phone down. Pews were crammed together. Everybody wore black. I recognized folks from my youth. The previous gardener who taught me to play the piano. Uncle Roy, too, who hadn't left the state in more than 2 decades. Everyone thought I was dead. Nobody contacted to confirm. Nobody sent a message. No questions. I was more than simply removed from the family. I was buried alive. I slipped to the floor of the kitchen. Unsteady breath. I can still hear the organ music from the funeral film. I started viewing the video again and again as if I was looking for a gap in the system, a clue that this was all a misunderstanding. However, there was none. This was a well-written tale, thoughtful and methodical. One thing became evident at that moment, like sunlight coming through a window. This was no coincidence. This was a decision. I once thought that the one thing in the world that would never abandon you was family, that your parents would always be your pillar of support, regardless of how skeptic the world grew. But a single, ruthless, frigid phone call 3 years ago destroyed that notion. My father, Richard Callahan, was the CEO of Callahan and Hart Design, the architecture business my family had established in Portland, Maine, where I was working at the time. And Judith, my mother, took care of the money. As a project coordinator, I was diligent, taciturn, and never made any significant mistakes. Prior to the end of quarter balance sheet being a nightmare, everything appeared to be going smoothly. The $63,000 in the project operations money was no longer there. It was plenty to drive everyone into a panic, but not enough to destroy the business. I can very clearly recall the emergency meeting. My father's face was as heavy as stone when he held the bank statement. My mom remained silent, just gave me the impression that she already knew the solution. "Abigail," he murmured, his words heavy. "Do you have anything you need to tell us?" Stunned, I gazed at them. "What are you saying? I didn't make a mistake." His subsequent statement, however, was a dagger. "Other than your mother, no one else has access to the internal code for that account. Do you believe we are unaware of that?" My mouth fell open. "Hold on. Do you believe I stole that money? Do you think I'm capable of doing that?" "Keep quiet." Nobody responded. From the corner of the room, there was a brief flash of avoidance. Emily, my younger sister by 4 years, was standing by the coffee maker with her arms folded and tapping a ceramic mug with her deep red nails. No assistance, no defense, just. Then I realized the person who did it was Emily. She had just started working in the finance division. She had always been loved by my parents, thought she was lovely and intelligent, a marketing natural. However, I had seen the odd invoices from expensive stores in her drawer, weekends spent at spas with wealthy friends, things her wages just could not pay for. I got up and faced my folks. Emily was the one. Both of you are aware of it. You simply don't want to acknowledge it. My mother lifted her head and gave me a direct glance for the first time. She spoke in a low, icy tone. Abigail, we've had enough of this. Do you not see? Is it preferable to have one damaged child than two? What I was hearing was unbelievable. They weren't only suspicious of me. To keep Emily safe, they decided to expel me. My bank account was blocked when I returned to my residence the next morning. My business email was locked. Messages requesting answers over accusations of embezzlement filled the voicemail. No formal declaration, no opportunity to clarify, simply gone. I tried contacting friends and coworkers. Some gave curt replies. The majority didn't reply. I was once close to them and I messaged them. She answered in a single sentence. You ought to let this go. I turned into a ghost. No place, no voice. So I really vanished. I departed from Portland. Everything familiar? Using my middle name, Abby Hart, I relocated to Vancouver, Canada, where I found work in a little bookshop close to the train station. I was only a simple girl living in silence there. No social media, no communication with previous acquaintances. Even so, I made an effort to move on. On some evenings, the unsolved question kept my heart racing as I lay awake. Were they ever considering me? Feel bad about it. But now that I'd seen that video, I knew the answer. In addition to not regretting it, they staged a fictitious funeral to inform everyone that I had passed away. Not that they were unaware of my existence. They decided to cut me out of their life, to keep my sister safe. In order to divide the inheritance, must remove Abigail Callahan's name from everything that may embarrass them. They too believed that I would never return. They were mistaken. I made an effort to forget. It was behind me, I assured myself, that I had made it through my life's hardest fall. But you can't relax in life. My attempt to retrieve an old email account was the beginning of it all. When I lived in Portland, I utilized it to apply for jobs and be paid. To finish my application for permanent residence in Canada, I had to obtain a few old documents. I estimated that this straightforward task would take a few minutes. I entered the password and my username, but the system returned an error. The account has been deactivated. The owner of the account has passed away. I blinked. Go over the message one more. No. I gave it another go. I attempted to get it by using my previous phone number. Useless. Because of a formal death notification from the local authorities, the email was permanently erased. My heart was racing as I sat still in front of the TV. Perhaps that was an error, a technological glitch. I went to the website of the Oregon Department of Vital Records. I entered the search bar with my name. On April 5, 1994, Abigail Elise Callahan was born, Portland. Almost at once, a record appeared. Abigail Elise Callahan is her name. The death date was August 17, 2020, due to an automobile accident in Spain. Status verified. No more confirmation is necessary. Certificate of death. AUD 78 F 6193 is the ID. I didn't breathe. Had never been in Europe before. Never submitted a visa application. I never purchased a ticket to Spain. Nevertheless, I passed away there. I selected download death certificate. A PDF opened with ID numbers, seals, and the coroner's electronic signature attesting to my death from traumatic brain damage sustained in a crash on a highway close to Barcelona. Although that didn't sound right. Who really needed the whole truth? As I read, my throat became dry. I was unable to blink at all. This was more than a simple miscommunication. It was a purposeful fiction. My death had been meticulously planned, complete with background information and even a precise location. Worse, they had deceived the authorities. I sprung from my seat. My hands are shaking. I took my old personal file out. Canadian identification, a U.S. passport, and a Vancouver health insurance card rental agreement, pay stubs. Everything from 2020 until the present has distinct dates. Nothing indicated that I had ever traveled outside of North America, much less perished in Europe. I opened a map and focused on the road close to Barcelona. The location where my death was recorded, a little village beside the sea, less than 4,000 people, no American embassy, not a big hospital. It's the ideal location for staging. Like a broken clock hand, the question kept repeating in my head, This was done by whom? Why go that far? This was more than simply severing relations or kicking me out of the family. I wanted to be erased from the world. My mother's eyes when she stated, "An undamaged child is better than two," came back to me. I was doubtful no more. My folks. Emily. They orchestrated this to profit from my disappearance, as well as to remove me from their life. My heart fell out of my chest when I opened my laptop, entered my name, and logged into the Oregon State Property Management System. All of my assets, including my grandparents' trust money, life insurance, and a portion of the business, had been completely transferred to Emily Callahan. February 2021 is the date. 6 months after my passing. This treachery was more than simply personal. This was a huge transfer of assets, handled lawfully in my name. It was dark when I sat. Suddenly, it seemed colder than ever in my small flat. Light snow was falling down outside the window as Vancouver settled into winter. The cold in my chest, however, was far worse. The tale was used to bury me. I needed to get myself out now. I believed that nothing could surprise me since I had prepared myself for everything. After discovering how obviously I had been eliminated, I then launched Instagram, not my. Long ago, that account was removed. Emily owned it. The algorithm unintentionally included one of her postings in my search after she had changed her profile from private to public. I was searching for information on Callahan. The reality hit me like an undertow with only one tap. I was astounded by her bio's opening statement. "I'm newlywed and surrounded by people who have always supported me." Photos from a grandiose wedding in Charleston, South Carolina, dominated Emily's Facebook. Long tables with white covers are bathed in golden sunlight. A tall display of crystal champagne, arches of flowers in the shape of a heart between old trees, lanterns of gold, a glistening mermaid dress, bridesmaid outfits in blush tones, all beautifully presented. I was never invited to this dream. I went through each picture in the center. One picture really got to me. Richard, my father, was smiling and holding a microphone beside the groom. "For the girl who never failed to make us proud," the caption read. I read it again and again. Not for me. The one who took on extra jobs to pay for education, got up early to make coffee for my mom, and filled in at the office when there wasn't enough personnel. But for Emily, the person who lied, stole money, and continued to live as if I had never been there. I continued to scroll. The following image displayed a hand underneath which was a huge diamond wedding band. "We are grateful to our cherished parents for providing the full cost of the wedding, including the beautiful house they recently moved into in Portland's most affluent area, Lake Oswego." I checked real estate ownership this time when I reopened the property records. My father had already registered that residence in my name. He promised to compensate me with a portion of the money once I finished my MBA. I wanted to earn it myself back then. Therefore, I refused to take it immediately. 9 months after my death certificate was produced, it was passed to Emily Callahan, the lawful owner of my heart. The connected bank accounts mentioned in the family inheritance declaration were examined by me. My name was gone once more. Emily Elise Callahan Hart, the only recipient of the Internal Scholarship Fund, was listed in its place. A brand new hyphenated name. Our grandparents gave us a joint investing account and even a life insurance policy that I was unaware of. My entire body was paralyzed as I sat there feeling numb. My mind started repeating one idea. They did more than simply take my position. They changed everything so that I didn't exist. I used to be the heir apparent. My grandparents once decided that I should keep the majority of the money intended for future generations. After my father retired, I was promised a position as a managing partner. But now Emily owned everything. Not a single picture of myself was shown. Not a single reference. Not even a wish that she were present. Beside my mother, grinning, was Aunt Margaret, who used to send me Christmas cards each year. Dean, one of my cousins, was clinking wine glasses. The entire family seemed content and pleased, as though I had never been a part of them. The moment I enlarged a picture of my father's speech was the one that broke my heart the most. A big screen behind him displayed events from the bride's life. I saw a single picture. I recognized it right away. It was a picture of myself when I was 8 years old, sitting in the garden in the backyard and smiling. However, It had been altered. Emily's face had taken the place of mine, done sloppily, yet believable enough to trick a stranger. I wasn't just left behind. My past, memories, possessions, and ancestry were all obliterated. Emily's name will now be borne by me. I realized then if I wanted my life back, I was unable to remain silent. I may have been buried in falsehoods by them. However, I will now use that quiet to bring the truth to light.